Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Southern Necropolis, the Gorbals and Southside's very own City of the Dead. My name's Colin Mackey, aka the Happy Reaper, from Friends of Southern Necropolis, and behind the camera today is my good lady wife Elsie, also from Friends of Southern Necropolis, and we'd like to welcome you for today's tour. For over the next hour, we'll take you around a little online meander around the cemetery, and we'll introduce you to some of the characters and history of this burial ground of 250,000 residents, 250,000 people approximately buried in the three sections of the cemetery. First and foremost, I'd like to do a health and safety, as we usually have physical tours, and obviously under present circumstances we're online, but I'd still like to carry it out anyway. In the event of a fire, there's only one exit from the cemetery, unless you're good at climbing walls, which you don't do, as that's out through the archway of the gatehouse. If Elsie would like to turn around and show you, we're looking at the cemetery gatehouse. When you enter the Southern Necropolis, you come under and through the archway of our beloved gatehouse building. Now, the gatehouse is a historic monument in its own right. It was built in 1848 and designed by Glasgow architect Charles Wilson, who's also famous for Rutherglen Town Hall, the Great Eastern Hotel building, which is now 100 Duke Street in flats. Also, he did parts of Park Circus and Gartnavel Royal, the old building, which was once Glasgow Lunatic Asylum. Charles Wilson is also a permanent resident of the Southern Necropolis. He's buried in the back left quarter of the central section of the cemetery, and if we've got time later on, we'll take you up and show you his burial ground. Now, the archway itself once had gates on it, cast iron gates, and we lost them very early on in the First or Second World War. We don't really know. We've heard rumours and legends that the gates are in storage somewhere, and hopefully that will be true, and we maybe access them again in the future. To the right hand side of the gatehouse there's a tower, and that would be accessible from an internal spiral staircase made of wood and metal, but unfortunately it's just a basic skeletal structure of the stairway that still exists to this day. To the left hand side there's also a room at the bottom which had been used by the gardener and grave diggers. It's presently used by Friends of Southern Necropolis to store basic litter picking and basic maintenance tools for the cemetery. Above the archway is the committee room where the original Southern Necropolis committee would have met. It was started the cemetery by Colin Sharp McLaws and Archibald Edmondson. It's roughly about a 6x4 living room size, and it's got lovely features outside the window, and unfortunately a few years ago we lost part of the Oreo window, but that's in storage somewhere. The stairway itself would have took you to the roof, which would have given people who wanted to acquire layers in the cemetery a good bird's eye view of the many areas of the central, eastern and western, and you could get right up to the very top of the tower to get a further heightened view. Now, if you'd like to come with me, we'll take you on our first little introduction to some of our characters. We're going to walk up the central path. Just a few facts as we walk up. The first burial in the Southern Necropolis was the daughter of Archibald Cochrane in July 1840, and she was 16 months and she died of croup. So as I'm walking up the central path, I'm going to highlight some stones along the way, trying to walk backwards, showing my skills of walking backwards, which I've developed over the years, and I won't fall over because my wife will just point to things if I'm going to trip. We've got a lovely example of one of our bronzes. We've got 3 bronzes in the Southern Necropolis, and this is one of John McNaught's family, and it's a master blacksmith from the Gorbals in Glasgow. And as you can see on it, there's a scene. There's a blacksmith scene with the workers on the anvil and some of the tools of the trade. And one of the guys, unfortunately on the right, has, as Glaswegians would say, he's lost the head. But we tried to retrieve it, but it's hopefully in the future we'll get a bit of restoration work done it. The lettering is painted by a local monumental sculptor, Stuart Craig, who does a lot of enhancement work for the Southern Necropolis and other cemeteries across the city. Now, as you see, as you walk through the cemetery, we've got a on-site heritage trail. I nearly said online, but it is online as well. We've got a Mind Maps map as well, which also links to the heritage trail, and it's a selection of 31 characters. We do have brochures. If you come down in the future, we're here on a Sunday from 12 to 2, we can get you an actual physical brochure, but you can use it online with your tablet or whatever phone device you've got, and Google Maps will show you highlighted points for the characters. So we're going to take you onto the path. There are some people we've had in tours before. I'll ask you questions. Do you feel all right walking in people's graves? Well, we believe, first and foremost, yep, the Southern Necropolis is a burial ground, and we respect that fact. But also, there's inscriptions on the stones, and they're there to be read And it's a celebration of life as well when you walk around the cemetery, and you can learn about some of the lives and achievements and the industrial kind of social structure of the area and Glasgow, and further afield in fact, by reading headstones and looking up the records. We're going to walk up to an example of one of the characters from the trail. Always remember you're in the cemetery, just watch for any overhanging branches because it's a natural environment as well. The grass does get cut, we do get it cut by Glasgow City Council, and we've got good links with bereavement services and neighbourhood and sustainability as well, and this is one of our graves here. This is two of the ladies who died at the fire of Higgins Botham's Mill in McNeil Street. Higgins Botham's Mill were calico printers, they used to print onto materials, and what happened was the material, when it was getting dried, it would be passed across the roof and along rollers and drop into drying buckets. But unfortunately back then there was a lot of gas lights in these factories, and when you read up the Glasgow Herald newspapers for the time, you'll find out what basically happened is the material caught fire and the factory went up and a lot of young girls lost their lives. And this is a stone, and it's Janet Cameron Jack is one of the ones you can read. If you go to the website you'll get the full details on it. This stone is starting to wear a little bit because obviously there's lots of different materials for stone. This is sandstone, so sandstone doesn't really fare well to the weather. Another one right next to it, I always like to look at stones and give people a mention, because my wife Elsie and I always believe when you read a headstone you're bringing someone into the present and remember them. This is George LaPrake Wright, and some of the inscriptions in the stones are really nice and decorative. So that's number 30 on my trail. Now I'm going to take you through and show you one of my favourite names in the Southern Necropolis. As I say, there's 250,000 burials in here. In every row in the cemetery, we have maps for the cemetery, and there's records in the Mitchell Library that you can get access to in the archives department. But every row in the cemetery are different price bands, and that was a unique aspect of the Southern Necropolis, that you could pay up a layer. It was William Gilmore who owned the land that was sold. Allowed to be sold for the cemetery. He stipulated that the graves would be available to the working classes at roughly 6 pennies a week. And this one we're going to show you up. There's another sandstone one. The inscription's a little bit better on that. This is one of my favourite characters for his name. In fact, it's on Google. A few years ago I seen somebody put a post on Google saying, what a cool name for a guy to find in a cemetery. One of the coolest names that's noted in the Southern Necropolis, and it's in memory of Tyre Vector. I usually try and put on my tours, I put on my kind of half-hearted Sean Connery impersonation, but we'll give that a wee miss today. And it's in memory of Tyre Vector, beloved husband of Helen MacDonald. I actually got in touch with Tyre Vector's granddaughter a few years back. The lady sent me a nice letter, which I still have, told me that Tyre Vector came over to Glasgow. He ended up in Glasgow, but he ended up living in Echo-Feckin, and he was adopted. He was brought over, looked after by a doctor, and he ended up living up in Kirfin Street, and he was a master tailor. So a lot of kind of documents and stuff you can find out when you look into the history of the man himself. And this is a stone that's lying. We've still got the inscription, it's really good. It's leaded lettering, and that tends to fare well as well to the weather. So that's Tyre Vector, one of the coolest names in the Southern Necropolis, Tyre Vector. This one here is another one that's quite prominent, and this is the Robb family. And it's got nice ornate lion's heads atop of it. It's a big urn, and it's just basically the Robb is the surname. You can see a lot of the lettering is worn away. There's also an inscription on this side, which is since worn, but it's quite a prominent stone as you walk into the central section as well. You can notice well on it, the lion's heads at the side of it. I'm just wondering if those lions have got holes in their mouth, if maybe it's a kind of a system for the water to run out, which it might be. We need to watch the next time it rains. We'll see if any water comes pouring out of it. I'll leave a wee bucket at the bottom and try and catch it. But it's a lovely stone. A little bit worn, but it stands out really well. That's the Robb family. Lots of variations in stones, lots of great variations in inscription types as well in the cemetery. And it's one of the aspects that we use for the cemetery. We've set up educational projects for local schools, and we've highlighted the literacy aspect of it and numeracy aspects of it, because literacy, you can actually look at the different styles of writing. There's obviously spelling on stones, then you've got the numeracy. You can get children to come in, show them a learn map in the class, bring them down, and ask them to locate a stone. A lot of the stones in the cemetery have got layer numbers carved onto them. Unfortunately, for research purposes, they've not all got numbers on them, which would be a lot easier for us. But a lot of them have the numbers on it, and you could use that for the schools, for the children to try and locate a stone. I'm going to take you through. I'm going to show an example of the ingenuity of the monumental sculptors that were based in the Southern Necropolis early in the day. And this is different ideas for them to kind of basically make money. And they came up with ideas, for example, cast iron monuments. We have a few cast iron monuments in the Southern Necropolis, and this is one that's still got the lettering on it. It possibly might be alright again if it was painted, but we don't really know. But it's kind of worn, it has worn, but it's a cast iron monument. I've got 5 or 6 of them in the Southern Necropolis. It's got a little kind of decorative feature on the top of it up here. So that's cast iron, something different. And it's James Downey Senior, the family, the Downey family. So they gave him a little mention. We always like to kind of try and read a name out, or some names every time we come down to the cemetery, just to give him a little mention. There's some newer stones in the cemetery as well. This one over here, that's a granite stone, Margaret Proven. They really do last well. They've got a good strong stone, still polished, and if it's cleaned up it probably just looks as good as new. Here's a nice stone. We always kind of like, we walk by, this one's usually got nice heather on it. This is Mary Ann Howie, and this stone was done by Lipton's Monumental Sculptors. It's up near the Star Bar, people probably passed it by. It used to be at the side of the British Linen Bank building, but they moved up the road. And it's a lovely stone, it's granite as well. It's nice, it basically looks brand new. We're going to walk you up here. This part of the wall was repaired a couple of years ago. Covenburn done it. There's a name, there's a nice name for people with different names on it. Alexander Allen, merchant, Henry Gray, and we've also got John McKelvey, second son of John Allen. Nice, like kind of different styles of inscriptions and stones. But as I say, the wall was restored by Covenburn, and they did a really good job of it. There are people who do visit the cemetery. There's people, basically every year, there's people doing genealogy. As you know, it's more accessible online now, you can do stuff. And we have had people in the past come down and they've found out they've got family links in the cemetery, and we've helped them locate it through obviously the help of the Mitchell Library and Bereavement Services. Now we're going to take you up to a stone as again an example of just how important cemeteries are for social history, and let us Charlotte Hutt, who started the first project for the Southern Necropolis, called the Southern Necropolis a window on time. So you're getting a wee peek into the past. And this is the Patterson family. Who's the Patterson family here, you ask? The Patterson family, if you read the stone, vinegar merchants from Glasgow, at the very bottom of it, erected by their son, Campbell Patterson, founder of Camp Coffee. So this is the Patterson family who founded Camp Coffee. The Camp Coffee factory used to be over at Charlotte Street, and they later moved through to Paisley, if I remember rightly. And now Camp Coffee is produced by Schwartz, I think, if I'm right. An idea apparently came from, as there were vinegar merchants, vinegar back in the day was used to preserve fruits and vegetables, etc. It was also used for medicinal purposes. You would soak sheets in it and use it as a physical barrier in the room if there was fevers in the room. And also, you know, Jack and Jill went up the hill, vinegar and brown paper when Jack hurt his head. The idea came up, it was the Gordon Highlanders asked Patterson family for any kind of idea for producing a coffee that they could be produced on the field quickly, and the residue that came from the coffee process at the very end of it, they could mix it with water, and they came up with Camp Coffee. I've never tried it, I've smelt it. I don't actually like coffee myself, but we've met people on the tours who've tried Camp Coffee, and you can still buy it to this day. You can buy it in various supermarkets and stores. Now, we're going to head up onto the path, but first of all, I'd like to give them a mention before we go into the next quarter. This is a very prominent gentleman in the Southern Necropolis. I told you at the start, a lot of the layers and the rows have different price bands. There's 21 shillings the cheapest, 36 and 9pence, 52 and 6, and the ones on the wall, perimeter of the wall of the cemetery, start from £9 to £12. Well, one such gentleman who must have been held to high esteem was James Stewart, who was the gardener of the Southern Necropolis. Now the inscription on the wall stone has worn quite badly, but it's for 25 years he was the gardener of the Southern Necropolis, much respected gardener, and this is his burial place here. So they must have held him to really high esteem to give him a burial spot on the wall of the cemetery. That would have been his main job, would have been to look after the cemetery. Obviously would have helpers as well, but he would have been responsible for the maintenance of the cemetery, looking after the various graves and floral kind of aspects of each section. So we're going to walk up. We're going to take you up to the circle, show you a Franciscan circle. We'll look into that, and we'll show you some documents as well. We get questions asked a lot during my tours, and one question in particular people ask is, when the cemetery was opened in 1840, was there any grave robbers in the cemetery? Basically back in 1839, there was a Cadaver Act was passed, a Cadaver Act, where you could legally acquire bodies for medical purposes, for research or study, from mortuaries. So I don't really, obviously there's still the aspect for people to try and rob graves. This was a patent that was done. I always like to show this in 1881. December 20th, 1881 for a coffin bomb. And basically what that is, it's a pudding shape with a spring system in it, full of lead shot and explosives. You put that on top of the person that passed away, you close the coffin lid and you would listen for a click. And once that click was in place, that was it, the charge was set. And should your wee grave robber come along, find a wee grave, it's just been freshly dug and set, come down through the night, shovel at hand, dig, 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 let's open the coffin and get a wee body. They'd hear, the last thing they would hear was the click and a very loud bang, and they would end in all different parts of the cemetery, because that was a coffin bomb. So that was to try and deter grave robbers. A lot of the wall stones are covered by ivy, and we've been asked as well, why can't we remove the ivy? But a lot of the ivy is actually holding the wall up, because it's physically worked its way through. The roots of the ivy has physically worked its way through the wall. And we've got a lot of wildlife in the ivy as well. We've actually got foxes that live up on the wall, because we were in a few months ago and a fox, straight ahead there, a fox popped its head out and it ran back into the wall. So they've worked a kind of a tunnel system out into the wall of the cemetery. We're just going to come up, we're going to head up to the circle. We'll be heading into the western section later on in the tour. Central section was opened in 1840, and then later in 1846, 6 years later, most of the layers in the central section were bought up. They weren't necessarily filled, but they were bought up by families and subscribers to the layers, and they extended the cemetery to the eastern section in 1846. 1846, it was extended to there. Then later in 1850, obviously as the area of the Gorbals expanded, the need for a burial ground was even more important. They extended it into the western section in 1850. So that explains, because people always come into the cemetery and they'll ask, 250,000 burials, but once we show you the western section, you'll understand just how large the cemetery is. Now walking up to one of our features, Friends of Southern Necropolis, the group, we do our best, we strive to promote and preserve the many aspects of the cemetery. And we do enhancements in the areas, different areas of the cemetery as well. We worked on this to tidy up the Franciscan Circle. This was set up in 2003, and it's the final, the real reinterment of 20 skeletons that were found at an excavation up at the City Science site up at High Street. Archaeologists did a dig and they found the remains of the Franciscan monastery, and within that monastery there was a grave of 20 skeletons, and they reinterred them into this circle here. So in this part of it here, there's a casket there, and there's a casket here. So on each side of the circle, and my wife and I, Elsie, were married here in 2015 as well. We get special permission to be married. But there's a casket on this side, and there's also a casket on this side of the circle, and there's a plaque to mention what happened when they were reinterred in 2003. If you come down to the circle, you'll be able to read it. Two seats at the circle. Inserts on the granite seats are original stones from the water well at the Franciscan Monastery in High Street. These are circa 1500s. When it was finished, the ceremony in 2003 and everybody left, I was here myself. And the story goes, I had a lottery ticket. My granny used to always say, never pray for money, but you can hope for it. So I rubbed my lottery ticket off one of the stones, and I won the lottery that day. I won £10. So I managed to get a curry and a bag of chips. So, but there you go. But it's great to know we've got a great historical link. There's scratches on the stone, so who knows how that happened. There might have been a bucket or whatever at the time. These have been on the original water well that the monks or the benefactors would have retrieved water from. So when you come down to the cemetery, you can see that when you're here for a visit. We're going to head up, heading south, up the central path at the back of the Franciscan Circle. Nice Celtic cross there. Evelyn, Helena, Malcolm family, and the Nielsen family as well. Lovely decorative ivy carving on it as well. And at the side of stones, you'll usually get the monumental sculptures as well, and that's W. Scott from Cathcart. And sometimes you can actually see the guidelines that's been drawn or scratched onto the stone for the sculptors to get a line for them when they're doing their writing on it. It's a great art to be seen and getting done. We have as I say, we've got a friend, Stuart Craig, who's a monumental sculptor, and we've seen Stuart do this in the school. He came out to a couple of the schools, Blackfriars and St Francis Primary, and he gave a demonstration and let some of the children try it. And he let me try it, and it's a lot tricky. It's really tricky to do. That's James Smart, number 18 on my trail. That is the Superintendent of the Police in Glasgow. Alistair Dinsmore's got the Glasgow Police Museum in Bell Street. Lots of fantastic history in there. I'm sure Alistair's got some kind of information on, or some kind of presentation on for doors open this year. And James Smart was present at the bread riots in 1848 in Glasgow. There's lots of history online for that. Lots of nice wildlife and lots of nature in the cemetery. We've got a tree trail in the cemetery as well. The trees have got little plaques on them. It tells you the name of the trees. We're actually working on doing a mind maps as well, so you can go online and check it. Everything's technology, you know, we can reach out. And we've got 27 Commonwealth war graves in the Southern Necropolis. There's also a mind maps on our homepage for that as well, where you can go on, click on, the Google map comes up with all the little markers on it. And if you're in here yourself, or even if it's just showing somebody at home, you can find out a little blurb about the soldiers. Hi Millie. Millie, if Millie's watching, hiya. If you want to fly any questions in, we're up for some questions. This is Sunday can be question day. Any particular question at all you want to ask about the Southern Necropolis, go for it. I'm sure you're finding it dead interesting. Yes, that's a graveyard sense of humour. You develop that through the years of coming round the cemetery. We're coming up to one of our other bronzes. I told you we've got 3 bronzes. This is the second one. John Robertson, who did the engine for the steamship, famous steamship Comet, for a hotelier, Henry Bell. We'll take you up and show you. Again, always be careful for any overhung branches and stuff. It is a natural environment. This is number 17, and this is John Robertson. This was put up, this monument was erected 1912 by members of the Institution of Engineers and Shipbuilders. It's a lovely little stone, and the eyes tend to follow you. The children that came down from school with us one day for the project said, the eyes look as if they're following you, Colin. So it's a really nice stone. Again, a link for John Robertson. If you go down to Helensburgh, down to the front at Helensburgh, there's an obelisk kind of feature there, big obelisk, and it's dedicated to Henry Bell. And Henry Bell was a hotelier that John Robertson did the engine for the steamship, the Comet. So that's a nice little bronze. We'll take you back onto the path. We've actually got dedications that people find graves that they want to put rededications down for people, and that's a nice wee poppy. Elsie met the people a few weeks ago that had put this down, so we get a lot of that as well. We actually do, in normal circumstances, we do a health walk in the cemetery. We also do yoga. We've got good links with Flow Yoga. They're online. If you go to Facebook, you can find them. And Claire came down, who's a yoga teacher, and we did the summer solstice this year, but it was just social distance. But last year we had a group down, and a lot of people are quite surprised when they find out that a Happy Reaper can do yoga and can sit with his mouth shut for half an hour. But there was photographs taken, so if you want proof, go online. I've got a reputation for being rather chatty, but again, I'm speaking for the dead, so I've got to do it. I've got to let them know that I'm speaking for them and represent them, if you like. We're heading up west on the back right quarter of the central section. Lots of different variations of stone. There are a few stones lying down. Again, Ideally it'd be nice to see them all stood back up, but a lot of the older stones wouldn't really take that, so bereavement services have done their best to kind of prop them up against the bases so you can see the inscriptions for genealogical purposes, or again if you're looking for a grave. Lots of varied kind of surnames, old kind of classic first names as well. There's a good example of what a stone can tell you. There you go, if you're doing family history, John Bryson. What did John Bryson do? Well, he was a butcher for Eggleton Street. So there you go, you've filled in a wee jigsaw piece for your social history. There used to be a butcher in Eggleton Street. And for a little fact, Peter Mortimer, a good friend of ours, who's a great expert in Gorbals and Glasgow history. We usually do the Gorbals bus tour, but we can't do it this year. We found out, Peter was telling us last year, there's approximately 130 pubs in the Gorbals and over 1,000 businesses in the area. So 130 pubs. So if your dad or that was going for a pub crawl back then, they'd probably take a suitcase with them and you wouldn't see them for a few weeks. 1,000 businesses, it just gives you an idea. 90,000 population at one time in the Gorbals too. On my left here, we've got a little young tree that we've planted. It's growing up really nice. And the nasturtiums at the bottom, Tom Thumbs I think they're also called. Hopefully Charlie and Jimmy will correct me on that. Hopefully I've got it right. And this is the grave of the Adsheads family. They were jewellers and stationers from Glasgow, and they're famous for the Adsheads Guide to Glasgow, which is kind of like yellow pages of the day, like a Thompson's directory. Told you the tram times, opening times of shops, and A to Z of the businesses in the city. It's a great stone. We hope we're going to be working this in the future. We're going to put red stones around it and put a floral feature on the trunk that's still located on the grave. Another nice example is a lettering on stones as well. John Graham, Rowan Lee and Paul Shield, Donald Henry, his children Donald Henry, James Curry, and Alexander McDougall, and Anna McDougall, his wife. So lots of nice kind of, you get blank ones as well. Again, the important fact of the Southern Necropolis was you could afford an affordable and respectable place of burial. So a headstone would have came later on. This is a certificate. When you were buried in the Southern Necropolis, you'd be given a certificate to prove you're there. And this is kind of nearly the actual size of it. This is one for the Eastern Quarter, or Eastern Edition. And this is to certify, it gives you the date, and at the bottom of it, it's got Colin Sharp McLaw's signature on it, who was one of the gentlemen who ran the Southern Necropolis Cemetery. That's a certificate for the Eastern Edition to the Southern Necropolis. So that's what you would have been issued. That would have been your proof of having a lair in the cemetery. Again, meant to show you a nice wee advert there. We showed you Camp Coffee's grave, and that's a Camp Coffee advert, an early advert. Glasgow coat of arms saying ready, aye ready, let Glasgow flourish by the use of camp. Established in 1849 by Patterson and Sons. So there you go, a nice wee. We've also got tea in the Southern Necropolis, of course, I won't forget to mention them. We've got Sir Thomas Lipton in the eastern section of the cemetery. And those of you who buy Lipton's iced tea, you go to certain takeaway places of fast foods and they give you iced tea. You see the name Lipton, remember that the Lipton family resided in 10 Crown Street and the shop was in 11 Crown Street. The close that Sir Thomas Lipton lived in was nicknamed Millionaire's Close because Sir Thomas Lipton came from it, became a millionaire. Kennedy Jones lived in that close, went to Australia and became an editor of a big newspaper. And the Dick brothers lived in the close as well, and they opened shoe shops all over Great Britain. So 3 millionaires came from that close, and we always use Lipton as a kind of example to the children at school. Lipton had lots of dreams and ambitions as a young boy, and he didn't let anything stand in his way, and he always strived to get just to do his best. And he did. By the age of 30, he was a multi-millionaire, and he's one of the most famous names to this day still, Lipton's, that people come in and ask, where's Lipton buried? He's in the eastern section that runs parallel to Caledonia Street. I'm going to head up. We're walking up the path again. We're going to, you hear there's lots of bits of wildlife in the cemetery as well. It's a good natural environment. We've got lots of bees, birds. We believe we've got badgers and stuff. We had a deer in the cemetery about 2-3 years ago. Came in for a visit. My good wife Elsie was there to get a photograph of the deer. And I get excited and shouted out, Elsie, there's a deer. And what happened is, Bambi ran away. And Elsie was standing with the camera like that as if, why? I just got excited. Right, over right there, it's Wilhelmine Elvin Woiker. who was involved in setting up the British Women's Temperance Association. And in her early years, Wilhelmine and her friends would go up the town to the city centre and hand out clothes and food to the needy, with their husbands in the background just to keep an eye on them. And the Woyka family are famous for being timber merchants as well, her husband as well. And the lettering was done by Colin Mackey, letter writer. It's just a little experiment to try it. I think I did no bad. It does stand out. And over here, another famous name in Glasgow history is Alan Glenn, founder of the famous school. It's nice pink granite. And at the side of it, two little columns would originally have, we believe, chains coming out to border the grave as a decoration, but they were taken away in the 30s, I think, because the gardeners and the grass cutters, making it a bit more difficult for their jobs to get through and cut the grass. The last burial in the Southern Necropolis, I'm thinking about questions. Anybody want to put any questions in, feel free. The last burial in the Southern Necropolis was 2007, and in the central section. So if you have family history and you find out that you've got links to a grave in the cemetery and there is room in that grave, it's quite feasible that you can get it opened and you can get buried in it in the future. So that's how you can end up in the Southern Necropolis as well. On your right hand side we've got a cast iron monument, another cast iron example of the imagination of the monumental sculptors of the time. Friends of Southern Necropolis got some funding through Godwell's Ideas Fund for a lot of the stones in the cemetery, and that's one of them. We put flowers in it. We actually dug the outside of it, took all the rubbish inside it and put some nice soil and flowers in it to make it a decorative feature. We get a lot of visitors to the cemetery, 120,000 hits on the website. People from all over the world come in. Again, genealogy's opened up because of the internet, and people are finding that they've got ancestors in the cemetery. That big obelisk, if Elsie can just zoom, we'll just show you. The big obelisk, kind of tall stone at the background there, in the middle of the film, that's the burial ground of the Bayliss family, who have got links with the Theatre Royal. It's a great place to come as well for it's very quiet at the weekend. It's a great place to come in and just contemplate and relax and just come in for a little walk. When it was opened in 1840, the cemetery itself was laid out as a garden cemetery with uniformed rows and pathways, and it's actually had floral arches. We've seen early drawings. There's a drawing from 1849 which we believe was done by Charles Wilson, and there was floral arches on some of the entrances and along the pathways as well, which would look really, really nice. On my left is a classic example of 27 Commonwealth war graves in the cemetery. These are put down by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Regimental insignia, the serial number on it and the name of the person. This is W.J. Fleming, Royal Engineers, 4th of February 1919. And as I say, we've got 27 of those stones in the cemetery as well. There's a My Maps trail online for it. Every year on Remembrance Sunday, we go around the cemetery and we place poppies in each of the graves. Again, I believe that'll be social distance this year. But we'll do it online so you can join us from all corners of the world. You can be with us. It's another bit of signage we've done in the cemetery to let you know, because people always go, "Where's the western section, Colin?" So we got some funding back a few years back, and Stuart Craig, our good friend, created these lovely signs for us to let you know where you're going in. Now, this is the largest part. This usually surprises people. So I'm waiting for online gasps of amazement. When you walk into the western section, Elsie, I'll just stand back and Elsie can pan round and show you. This is the largest part of the Southern Necropolis. This was opened in 1850. 1850, so this was the last part of the cemetery to be opened. And we'll show you one of the more famous individuals that are buried in here. There's actually graves at the back of the grassed area at the back, at the south terrace, and a grass area at the right hand side, which is the north terrace. There's burials there, but they're not marked with any stones. So we'll enter the western section. We've got lots of plans for the Southern Necropolis for the future. Our hopes are to have the gatehouse restored and get the gatehouse adapted and restored into a kind of like community heritage history hub for local schools and community groups and visitors, obviously. So you can come up to the committee room, we'll have archived documents, etc., access to the internet, and you'll be able to come round and do little kind of arts experience, yoga. Stuart Craig will probably come down and let you try your hand. I'll show you how to do monumental sculpturing. And then there's a biodiversity of the cemetery, looking after it. We get birds, the bees, wildlife, just the mental health benefits of coming in and just walking about. There's also different kind of projects we could do online. We can have parts of our website dedicated to groups and schools to add stuff onto. And again, the gatehouse would be great with a little extension on it. We could have a kind of container type kind of like workshop, if you like, at the side of it, a kind of resource centre. And it's great to bring visitors down because it's all flat. It's nice to walk around. We get cyclists coming down, we've got walkers coming in, walking groups. In the past we've had Easter egg history hunts. We use a heritage trail and we put plastic eggs at various characters on the trail, give the children little question sheets, and they go and try and find, if they find an egg with a number in it, there's a question in it, they've got to answer so many. If they get so many right, they get an Easter egg. And we just gave them eggs anyway, but it's good to encourage them to learn about local history. Health walks as well, as I say, it's good to walk round it, to do that as well. We have a Halloween walk, but this year we won't be doing that, but we might be doing something online, so we'll be flagging that up if it's happening. Again, we're still researching the cemetery as we do stuff in it. We've got lots of different characters that we've not really found out about yet. There's another example of a war grave on my right hand side. Commonwealth war grave there. 27 of them. Commonwealth War Graves Commission have got a great website. There's a great archive on it. If you find out a family member in your history that you're doing any genealogy, you find out you've got a family member who lost their lives in any of the wars, they've got a great record that you can access online. We're really blessed by the internet these days. When the Southern Necropolis Research Project started back in 1988, I was fortunate enough to be employed by Charlotte Hutt as a research officer. And Charlotte was an ex-English teacher from Adelphi Secondary School. Had a strong passion for the Gorbals and its history and its people. And she set the project up. And the idea was to research the graves and highlight any famous characters and add them onto computer. And that was 1988. That was the very, very early days of the internet. And the computer we had in the Mitchell Library in my wee Carrel took about 15 minutes to warm up. So we used to, Gary, it was a computer operator, used to come out for the wee office and say, I'm going down for a cup of tea. And we'd say, Gary, where are you going? No, that computer takes about 15 minutes to boot up, and it did. Anybody knows about computer, MS-DOS, it used to all run up. It took 15 minutes to get started. But that was the idea. And Joe Fisher at the time, who was the late Joe Fisher who did the Glasgow Encyclopedia book, he stated that the Southern Necropolis project was a pioneering project at the time. So Charlotte, as I say, was a driving force behind the project. We're now walking up to a grave of a very famous man that people will know really well. I like to think of him as Glasgow's other famous architect. And this is Alexander Greek Thomson. I did a tour a few years ago and I made a mistake. I knighted him. I said Sir Alexander Greek Thomson, and somebody says, well, slip of the tongue. But it was nice to say it. This is Alexander Greek Thomson's monument. 2006 it was launched. I was there on the day, and I've got an illustration of the great man here. Place my stuff in the ground. It's black granite, approximately £16,000 worth of granite, and it's represent, the front of it is like a stairway to the next life, to whatever cultural beliefs where you believe you're going. That's the stairway to it. Surname Thomson on it, and the star represents eternity. It's quite difficult sometimes to film it or take photographs without getting yourself in the picture. You've got to do certain angles at it, as Elsie will show you. You'll see Elsie there. It's Elsie Elsie's just got a wee mention there on a visual mention. Well done. And this is the guy here. This is the famous man himself. Born 9th of April 1817, died 22nd of March 1875, and there he's there. Alexander Greek Thomson. And that was done by an artist called Colmack in 1999. I wonder who he is. We'll never know. You can buy copies of these drawings online to raise money for the Gatehouse. That's an idea, Elsie. Now walking up, again, the Friends of Southern Necropolis, we've got a great group of volunteers that help us. We're all volunteers. We're a fully constituted not-for-profit community group, and this is a part of a feature that we've been working on over the last few years. It's a circle of life because it's been adapting. It's survived the beast from the east, and it's been a great kind of haven for people during the lockdown, etc., for people to come down and walk around. We've got black membrane underneath it, but the birds are quite hungry down here, and every week we've got to put the stones back down because we've seen the blackbirds and stuff. They actually physically pull it up to get to the worms. They're not silly. They know what they're doing. A weeping cherry tree in the middle. We've done this. There's 35 bags of stones on there. We received funding from Gorbals Ideas Fund. We've got donations from benefactors, people that left, give us donations as well. And this is a plaque. This tree and circle area are both dedicated to the memory and work of Glasgow architect Alexander Greek Thompson. And we got the cobbles round it as well. It's a nice little feature dedicated to the man. And we've got planters around the circle. These have been set up, designed and created by one of our members, Jimmy. And Jimmy and Charlie are responsible for the development of the floral features in it. They've got green fingers, shall we say. That's James Allen there, that stone here. We found it, we didn't find it, it's obviously been in the circle for years. This is the family burial place of the late James Allen, the manager of Govan Colliery. And there's an address you would find out. You can find out a lot again through headstones. And he lived at Devon Villa in Cross Hill. So that's James Allen from Cross Hill. Find so much information from headstones. Amazing. We're going to walk up to my left, leaving the Greek Thompson Memorial Circle. I'm going to head up. Again, if anybody wants to fly any questions in, feel free. Try and catch out the Reaper. Question the Reaper. It's an idea for a quiz. Question the Reaper. The very back of the cemetery, 1950s, there was a big incident happened in the southern Necropolis that's very famous. And it was September 1950. It was a Gorbals vampire. 1954, sorry, the Gorbals vampire. So many dates. People always say when they ask me about numbers in the cemetery, I remember their numbers better than I remember any other numbers. The back of the cemetery would have been Dixon's Blazes. The ironworks and the whole environment of the cemetery would have been a lot different. It would have been lit up at night. The rumour had happened that 2 children had went missing in the Gorbals, and the rumour started that a vampire with iron teeth had eaten them. So approximately 150 children turned up at the cemetery, and one of our members, Jimmy McGregor, was actually there on the day. He was one of the vampire hunters, and he came over the wall from where he lived at Kidston Street, at Lawmuir Street, came over the wall and joined the rest of the children for the Gorbals area and Oatlands on the hunt for the Gorbals vampire. And the back of it would have been totally different, as I say. That would have been all lit up by Dixon's Ironworks. Now, we've got a little poem that I'd like to read. It was written. We came up with this wee poem a couple of years ago. And this is dedicated to the Gorbals vampire and all the vampire hunters. So I'd like you to close your eyes and imagine the environment back then in the 50s. Tenements and street lights, and it was a lot darker in the glow of the back of Dixon's Ironworks. Gather round, it's time to hear a legend story full of fear. Glasgow Gorbals, lots of wains, some with sticks and some with stains. Ready, able, brave and strong, all together run along to try and see and catch this guy. Perhaps he'll run or maybe fly. The story started from one mouth, then like wildfire went all south. A man so tall with teeth like steel, do we believe, could he be real? No time to waste, we must act fast, these poor took wains must be the last. It's said they came 150 strong, on Gorbals streets they ran along, running faster, gather speed, footsteps. Running faster, gather speed, footsteps. The gatehouse arch the mob did meet, what phantom creature must they defeat? Homemade weapons to defend, but all too soon comes to an end. The next day papers headlines read, vampire with iron teeth is dead. That was the Gorbals vampire The newspapers the following day put a headline saying the vampire with the iron teeth is dead. That was to stop children coming back down and looking for the vampire. It's a great legend, as I say, like the White Lady of the Southern Necropolis, that you walk down 3 times as she turns you to stone. The Gorbos vampire keeps the kind of Southern Necropolis alive, if you like. And so much so, there's a graphic novel series of 3 books dedicated, and it's come from the story of the Gorbos vampire. It's called The Children's Vampire Hunting Brigade, written by David Lucarelli and illustrated by Henry Ponciano. And it brings the story up 50 years, 60 years later, with 2 young guys come to the cemetery, and this time they discover there's actually a gang of vampires in the cemetery. In the last volume, I'll not give too much away, but the final battle takes place back in the cemetery. So get in touch if you want some copies, because we've got access to them. But it's a great thing to keep social history alive. Now we're going to head up, take you to the back right corner of the Southern Necropolis Western section, and we've got an area that we've been working on for the last few months, and it's called the Commonwealth Corner, which the group's been doing for to commemorate the war dead. But we've got a little character. The social structure of Glasgow changed so much through its history, as did the many people that came into Southern Necropolis. We believe that there's no class distinction in here. There's so much of a mixture of social history. You've got mill owners, mill workers, you've got bakers, you've got shop owners, you've got everyday characters from every walk of life. And this one in particular character's in a book called Glasgow Characters. You've all heard of Rab Haw, maybe Penny a Yard, but this guy is called Wee Willie White, who's a blind flute player. And he was a busker in Glasgow. And his grave's up at the back here, we'll show you. His grave's round here. And he's on my character trail as well, if you get the trail, or you go to my maps. Just be a bit careful when you're coming up to the western section. It's quite unsteady. Some of the ground's a bit challenging as you walk up. This is the grave of Wee Willie White, blind flute player. Number 24 in the trail. Wee Willie White lived at Salt Market, just up not far from the Shipbank pub. And he was a blind flute player. He used to busk at Salt Market. This is a man here. It's an illustration from an old book about Wee Willie White. You can access the book Glasgow Characters from a website called archive.org, and you can read the original book online. Wee Willie White died, and a gravestone was erected and a plot bought from him in the Southern Necropolis by his friends. And originally on the stone, there would have been a stone flute in its case, but it's worn away through the years with the elements. It's a nice testament to the man. It's nice to know that his friends thought that much of him, that they managed to get him a burial place. He died in respectable poverty, and he's buried in the western section, looking south into the south terrace of the cemetery. Okay, so we're going to go round and out again. We'll take you round and out. Back onto the path. Again, just be very careful. The grass can sometimes catch your feet. This whole area, the grassed area, at the back of the western section, has actually got all graves on it. Even though it's not marked with any stones, there is graves. We've got other wildlife in the cemetery today. Hiya! Your little canine wildlife. We're just going to head up, and we're going to show you up to the Commonwealth Corner. We'll take you up there. I've always wondered what it would have been like Glasgow at that time, Wee Willie White, with all the different buskers and characters at the Salt Market, like Rab Haw, Wee Willie White, Penny a Yard. Penny a Yard was a man that sold the string for penny a yard, and there was also a man in the Glasgow Characters book who had a cup strapped to his head, and he used to fling a metal ball up and catch it and get applause and get money donations that way. Great example for the cemetery, that when you look into the social structure of a city. If you want to find out about the living in an area when you're doing research, or if you get family tree stuff that you're doing, and for those of you that do it, go into a cemetery, because you'll find out about the structure of an area. Occupations, street names, different kind of surnames. You'll find out family members that you might not really, well, you could sometimes get 5 or 6 different kind of links to your tree on it. So they're a great resource in so many ways. Again, we get lots of visitors from all different parts of the world. A lady a few years ago came over from America, met her in the central section, and she spoke to me and she asked me, Colin, could you tell me where the Browns are buried? And I said, well, unfortunately, we don't run the rows alphabetically. And she laughed. I said, because basically the Z's and the X's would be rather quiet. But again, we're very blessed by the resources of the Mitchell Library that we've got for the archives up there with the burial books and burial registers, and a great staff up there. They're very, very helpful if you're looking for stuff to go up. And we've got the genealogy section as well. It's based in the Mitchell. It used to be around in Park Circus, but now it's moved into the Mitchell Library, so you can do it all in one visit. I believe the last time you could book a day for it, I think it was £15 for a day to access the records. So if you're doing your family tree. So we're coming up to the back left corner of the western section. And we're going to walk up this we've got a nice wee path here, and you'll get a nice view. A nice wee view for the last 10 minutes of the tour. Again, anytime you want to come down, friends of Southern Necropolis are here. There's a wee example of monumental symbolism. Carvings on stones mean different things. And this is a dove with an olive branch in its mouth. I'll show you that. And that represents hope. You get lots of different examples of monumental symbolism. You get egg timers with wings. You get anchors with broken chains. You get fingers pointing up, fingers pointing down. And I usually joke at my tours, if you get a finger pointing to the left or right, that's usually the exit. But lots of different examples about the stones can actually tell you a story. That's our catchphrase on our t-shirts. Every stone tells, if you can say it right, every stone tells a story. That's for t-shirts. If you like a t-shirt, you can get in touch with us as well. We've got t-shirts too. We really do believe it's important for local community and for visitors alike that we don't lose the treasures that our cemeteries can offer us. And the Southern Necropolis is an ideal place for so many different reasons. Obviously to remember and commemorate and respect those that are buried. I'm just looking up at our corner, else we've not been up for a few days, and our poppies have actually presented themselves to you. The group's been working in this area for the it's a Commonwealth War Graves, and it's the Commonwealth Corner to commemorate the war dead in the cemetery. And at this corner up here, this kind of section, if you think of it as a pizza quarter, this is called accommodation ground. This is an area for burials, for mixed burials. Not a pauper's graves if you like, but mixed burials could be buried up here. Again, it's an area that you could come and visit and pay respect. And we used this corner, we've enhanced it with the group. Jimmy's done some planters. Charlie and our expert in flowers, Jimmy and Charlie. And we've all worked together to put down. And Alan, my good friend Alan Robertson, came down a few weeks ago and gave us a hand to put the wee kind of wooden edging on it. And we get nice cobbles as well. So the poppies have come up really, really nice. I'm sure the group will be chuffed to bits. We usually come up here on Remembrance Sunday and we'll put up we've got big wooden silhouette soldiers and a big large wooden poppy, and we stand it up. The wooden poppy and the soldiers were created for us by the Gorbals Men Shed guys. And it's a great day. We stand up here and we commemorate the war dead, and we go around and put poppies down. So it's really, really nice. A nice wee area. And if you ever want to come up, just come up. If you want to come up and put a wee floral tribute down to somebody, or you'd like to just come up and contemplate and think about somebody, family members in the past or whatever, just come up. It's a nice wee place to walk around. This is an illustration I'd like to show you, by the way. This is Hannah, a good friend of ours who did the Gorbals Vampire. So anybody out there that's got any children would like to do is a wee drawing of the Gorbals Vampire. We'd like to involve children. We always believe that the younger members of the community should be an interest in their local history. So there's a good we want to do. Anybody wants to submit a wee drawing, you can send an email to colin@southernacropolis.com. We'll post it on, and we might even do a wee judging. Might do that for the day. And for yesterday, anybody wants to do it, we'll do a wee judging system. We'll put it online, and the first, second and third prizes will get a wee prize work to it. So it's the Gorbals Vampire by Hannah. So I'm going to show you another plaque that we've got. As well as the many war dead in the cemetery that are commemorated, we've got a VC recipient in this part of the South Terrace. As I say, this whole part here, there's roughly 45 double rows of burials in this area. So this whole area has got graves on it. And this one, this plaque here in particular, commemorates a gentleman called George Rogers, VC recipient, and I'll read it out to you when you come up. George Rogers, VC, Highland Light Infantry, awarded the Victoria Cross for valour on 18th of June 1858 at the Battle of Maragwali in India. He got his VC, he took on a band of army rebels on his own, but sadly he died on 9th of March 1870, interred near this spot. He actually died through a domestic accident. He was in his sister's house in Govan, and she left the house and he went into the kitchen looking for alcohol to drink, and he found a bottle under the sink and he drank it. It's in the Mitchell Library in the Glasgow Herald for that time, and sadly the bottle was full of vitriol, because it's kind of like sulphuric acid, and he drank it, and obviously it killed him. And it's sad to think that a guy, a VC recipient, such a thing had happened. It's a lovely plaque that we've got, and it's number 25 on my trail, and I think it's quite poignant in a sense that it's here in this whole area, because there's so many burials in this part, and it says interred near this spot. So it's one of the kind of, makes you think. There's a lot of kind of thinking aspects of the cemetery. You come in, you think about family members, or just think of the history when you start reading into it. Just so many things that people, it's like a jigsaw. Every piece and every bit of research that we find, every grave that we read, it links us to the past. And I like to think that the past is the kind of the links in the chain to the future, the anchor of the future. And a strong tree will grow with good roots in it. And that's what we've got to really appreciate. I hope for the future again, I'd like to say is to get the gatehouse restored. So in 2-3 years time, you can come down and buzz the buzzer or whatever we're going to have at the gatehouse. And one of us will come down, I'll buzz you up, you can come up, we'll have a lift as well at the side. Come up to the room, or go to the side annex kind of workshop or the art room or whatever, and learn about the cemetery, look up your family tree, learn about what's going on in the community, because there's so much going on in the area, so many community groups in the Gorbals, a vibrant area. And again, we'd like to just finish at George Rogers' grave, and to say, again, before I forget, we did some lettering on it, and it's needing a little bit tidied up, but it's looking okay. We'd like to thank so many people for this weekend. We know present circumstances, it's been difficult for a lot of people. It's been challenging, but Stephen Sheriff for the Glasgow Building Preservation Trust and everybody that works there, hats off. I've had a hat to take it off to you. Well done for doing this the last few days and what you've done, getting it all online, getting digital. It's got advantages in some ways as well, because we're all archiving there, we're online. So if you can't physically get to the things as you would usually do, at doors open, you can go online, you can look at it, enjoy it. You can share it with the world, share it with your family, and share about the history of Glasgow. There's so much going on in the city. It's a vibrant city and a proud city, and we've got so much that we can share with the world. I'd like to just finish off by saying, still on Necropolis, there's life in the city of the dead. Thanks very much, and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Take care.